here is the extension to the wiring harness for your tail light assembly. You have a turn signal connector here. You have a turn signal connector there. You have your rear brake light connector. It's a 3-wire right there. And then what I did in order to get the license plate light, I took and I soldered on a 2-pin connector onto that, and the person who I purchased the bike from put this connector on. So you can then slip that in there. We won't do that right now because I'm going to have to route some fairings. But what we'll do is come along now, take the black connector. Looks like this is a 5 connector pin. Find your connector that is right near all of the relays and fuse box, and then what we'll do is we can then come in and connect that connector there. And then now what we can do is let's route this underneath the evaporative emission pipes right here. So now this will go up and extend to the back in preparation to mount up the tail light assembly and turn signals. So we'll just leave that loose for now. So what we're going to do now that we have this set up, we're going to work our way forward to the front of the bike, and we're going to be wiring in the various connectors. The nice thing about this wiring harness is all of the connectors look like they're all unique. So it's just a matter of finding the male and female ends that match up to these connectors right here, and we'll plug everything in. So I'm going to be showing you how we'll be working forward and wiring up all of these connectors, and then what we're going to have to do is take the wiring harness and run it through. It routes mostly to the right hand side of the frame, and then up underneath the frame for the headlight assembly and all of your handlebar connectors for the electrical system. So I'll be showing you that as we move along here. If you notice, right in front of the battery box, there's a little zip tie fastener. And if you remove the old zip tie, if you remember when you remove the wiring harness, you cut the zip ties, then what you can do is you pull that old piece of zip tie out. You can then feed in a new zip tie. Notice I'm using a blue one, so you can see the difference between the black connector and where the zip tie slides into. Then what you can do is put that wiring harness down, and you can then zip tie that wiring harness to where it's snug up against the battery box. When working on the wiring, I like to start back here near the battery box. We already showed you how to wire in the relays and the fuse box. And here's your battery connector, the positive. There's your battery connector on the negative side. And if you look down inside, some of these wires are very intuitive where they go. For example, here's one that comes out of the wiring harness, and here's a connector. The nice thing is a lot of the connectors are unique. The 3-wire connectors are 3-wire, 2-wire connectors are 2-wire, and they're usually the same color. So you have the male portion and the female portion. There's a wire here. Here's your this is your fuel tank wire right here, possibly the sensor and or the fuel pump going up to the tank. There is right here, this connector goes down to your oxygen sensor, and this sensor is exactly the same. It's a 4-pin, as your regulator 4-pin connector. But the nice thing is this connector is a male, and this connector for the oxygen sensor is a female. So they've put a lot of thought so you can't get these connectors mixed up. Also, the positioning, this is a short connector coming out of the wiring harness here. There's no way it's going to reach the regulator on the other side. Same thing, there's a 3-pin connector coming up from your alternator, and it goes into the relay harness as well. I'm sorry, relay, the regulator harness. There's 2 connectors coming out of the regulator. One goes into the harness on this long connector, and the 3-pin connector from the alternator goes into the regulator. So those are pretty obvious to tell where they are. I'll show you here in a little bit certain wiring harnesses, for example, like your injectors and your coil wires. Let me move the camera here. Your coil connectors, they are not labeled at all. These are not, these are your injectors right here. They are not labeled at all. But the nice thing is that on these connectors, the wires are color coded. And I'll show you in a minute. We'll go take a look at the schematic for the L1, which is the model I have. And you can go in and tell by looking at the color coding which injector or which coil wire goes into the connector. So again, it makes it pretty easy to identify if you know how to read the schematic, and I'll show you some real easy ways. We'll go in and we'll take a look at that. So basically, I just go along and work one connector at a time, and we try to route the harness. Eventually, we'll run it through underneath the frame in the front, and we'll wire in the ECU, we'll wire in the headlights. But again, you just take one wiring connector at a time. You find the associated connector. If you don't know what it is, you find out the color code of the connector, and then you go in and look on your diagram. You know it's either a 2-wire, a 1-wire, 2-wire, 3-wire, 4-wire, or more. And then you go in and look at the schematic. You write down the color codes of the wires going into the connector, and it's really easy to identify which connector it is. You may have to do a little bit of looking. There's 2 diagrams for the L1 of the wiring harness, so it just takes a little bit of time to search them through. And again, I'll show you that here in a minute. So we have everything wired at this point up to the airbox area. So now what we're going to do is we're going to end this video. I'm going to go ahead and put the throttle bodies and the base of the airbox on. Then we can go in and wire in the injectors and the coils up here. And then at that point, then we can continue on with the front portion of the frame and all of the wiring there. But again, this will be the end of this video. Another video, I'm going to show you how to assemble the airbox. And then after that, we'll do another video with a continuation of the wiring harness. So we'll see you next time.